I'm Daniel, 29, and until recently, I'd have told you my family was just a bit distant, not cruel, not abusive, just selective with their warmth. Growing up, it was always about my younger brother, Jake. He was the athlete, the charmer, the one who could do no wrong even when he skipped school or crashed dad's car. Me? I was the quiet one with books, the one who got teased at dinner for always being so serious. But I never complained. I thought if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, maybe I'd finally be seen as more than just the family's background character. So I did. I kept my head down, got through college with honors, then a scholarship for a master's program in biomedical engineering. It was grueling, late nights, weekends and labs, months of ramen and missed birthdays. But I told myself it would all be worth it the day they saw me walk across that stage. I planned everything months in advance. My graduation ceremony was scheduled for a Friday afternoon, and since my family lived just 2 states away, I offered to fly home a day early and then fly them all out at my expense. I even booked a private dining room at a really nice restaurant downtown for the celebration afterward. 10 seats, custom menu, prepaid deposit. I sent the invites in a group chat with all the details and got a mix of lukewarm thumbs up emojis and one cool from Jake. But I tried not to read into it. People get busy, right? The week leading up to graduation, I barely slept. Not just from the workload, but from excitement. This was it, my moment. I even bought my dad a tie and had it shipped to the house, said in the card, "Can't wait to see you wearing this at graduation." No reply. Still, I kept hoping, kept believing. The morning of the big day, I called my mom to double-check flight times. She didn't answer. I tried again. Nothing. I figured they might be in the air already. The ceremony was at 3 p.m., and I kept checking the reserved seats up front that I'd saved with name cards. They stayed empty. I texted the group, "Where are you guys?" No answer. I tried calling again. Voicemail. I went up on stage, gave my speech to a room of smiling strangers, and my eyes kept flicking to the door. Waiting. Hoping. When it was over, I checked my phone and saw the message from Jake. "We're at Dad's barbecue." No one wanted to sit through another boring speech. LOL. I stared at it for a long time, reading it again and again like maybe it would change. Like maybe the letters would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. But they didn't. That was it. No apology. No regret. Just a casual dismissal of one of the most important days of my life. I went to the restaurant anyway. Table for 10, just like I planned. The hostess looked confused when I told her it would just be me. I sat alone under warm lighting with a perfectly arranged place setting in front of me. The waiter came by, his smile faltering slightly when he saw the untouched glasses around the table. "Should I wait for the others?" he asked. I just shook my head. "They're not coming." I ordered a glass of wine and stared at the flickering candle in the center of the table, wondering how I'd gotten here. Wondering if I'd made some fundamental mistake in expecting something different from them. Then I had a thought, cold, detached, almost mechanical. I flagged the waiter and asked for the check. Paid it in full, tipped well, and asked for a to-go box. Then I walked down the street to the nearest print shop, pulled up the live stream of my graduation on my phone, and took a screenshot of me at the podium. Printed it. Framed it. At the front, just below the image of me standing in front of hundreds of people, I added a small brass plaque, reserved for 10. I mailed the receipt for the dinner, the framed photo, and a link to the full live stream to my parents' house. No note. No explanation. Just the facts. What they didn't know yet, what no one outside of my lab did, was that the day before graduation, my team's project had secured $40 million in private funding. We were going live with development the following month, and I'd just signed on as the lead researcher. My name, Daniel Myers, was about to be printed on something that could change lives. That day, as the camera panned across the auditorium and captured my closing speech, I announced it publicly for the first time. The clip went viral on campus. My inbox filled with congratulations from professors, classmates, even people I'd never met. But from my family? Silence. That is, until an hour later. My sister, Emma, called me. 3 missed calls. Then a text. "Please call me." I had no idea it was this serious. "I feel awful." Then another. "Can we please talk? I think we messed up." And then one more. "Daniel, I'm crying. I'm so sorry. We want to reconnect. Please don't shut us out." I stared at the screen. My phone lit up again. And again. I didn't pick up. Because in that moment, I realized something. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. And now? Now I was building my own. I let the phone buzz in my hand until it finally stopped. Emma's name faded from the screen, leaving only the glow of my reflection on the black glass. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and stood at the corner of the street, the cold air cutting through the fabric like the silence had cut through years of effort. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming in. First from Emma, then my mom, then even Jake, who texted, "Didn't know you were doing big stuff. Congrats, I guess. Barbecue was lit though, lol." The casualness of it nearly made me laugh. It was like a child poking a hornet's nest and acting surprised when he got stung. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on work. The lab was buzzing with energy. We were developing a neural scaffold that had the potential to restore motor function in stroke patients. A massive leap forward if successful. Investors were flying in from 3 different continents. My team started calling me Doc, even though my doctorate was still in progress. I buried myself in it, and every day I didn't answer those texts felt like I was slowly reclaiming a piece of myself. About a week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a letter from my mom. Handwritten. It started with the usual, "We didn't mean to hurt you." Then, "You've always been so independent. We didn't think you'd care." And finally, "Your dad said it was too expensive to fly everyone out." But Jake was already planning the barbecue, and it felt easier to do one thing together. She ended it with, "We're proud of you, Daniel. We just wish you'd let us say it in person." Let them say it in person? After they ghosted my graduation? After they ate ribs in a backyard while I gave a speech to a crowd of strangers in the biggest moment of my life? I folded the letter once, then again, then slid it back into the envelope and left it on the shelf by my door. Then came the real cherry on top. 2 weeks after graduation, Jake posted a photo on Instagram. It was one of those obnoxious selfies of him shirtless at the lake, holding a beer with a fake deep caption, "Success isn't about degrees. It's about being real." The comment section was full of fire emojis and "preach bro" replies from his usual group of enablers. But nestled between all that noise, I saw a comment from Emma. "Honestly proud of both my brothers in different ways." That was it. That was the moment I realized they weren't sorry. Not really. They were embarrassed. They were scrambling to rewrite the narrative now that they knew I wasn't just the quiet one with books. I was the one who got out, who made it, and they were too late to be part of it. Still, I said nothing. But life has a funny way of circling back. A month after my announcement, the university hosted a private networking gala for donors, researchers, and selected faculty. It was a big deal: black tie, champagne towers, and a list of people whose names regularly appeared in Forbes. I'd been asked to speak again, this time about innovation and access. My face was on the brochure, and I knew, because of course I knew, that the university sent one of those brochures to every family of graduating honors students. Sure enough, 2 nights before the gala, my dad emailed me. A single line: "We're coming into town this weekend. Want to grab lunch?" I stared at the message like it was radioactive. He hadn't called. He hadn't even acknowledged the photo I'd sent. Just this sudden pop-in invitation, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. The day of the gala, I stepped onto that ballroom stage in a tailored navy suit, my name projected in elegant lettering behind me. I gave a 10-minute speech about resilience, about rising from obscurity not in spite of being underestimated, but because of it. The applause was thunderous. And then, as the crowd dispersed for drinks and photos, I saw them. Standing awkwardly near the entrance were my parents. My mom was wearing the same blue blazer she always wore to important events. My dad looked stiff, like he didn't know how to dress for this kind of success anymore. Emma was with them, smiling a little too wide. Jake wasn't there. They spotted me. My mom raised her hand slightly in a wave. I smiled politely, then turned and walked in the opposite direction. For the rest of the night, I made sure I was always across the room, deep in conversation with funders, laughing with professors, posing with my team for photos. I never once looked back in their direction. They were strangers now, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized they always had been. That night, I checked my phone and saw a final message from Emma. "We were really hoping to talk tonight. You're still our brother. Please let us in." The message from Emma stayed on my screen longer than it should have. I kept rereading it, not because I was considering replying, but because I was trying to figure out when that word, brother, had stopped meaning something. It wasn't an overnight thing. It was gradual. A slow erosion of every ignored phone call, every birthday they skipped, every time they called Jake the successful one, while patting me on the back like I was some family pet that managed not to bark too loud. But that night, something inside me truly shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just shut off the screen, got into bed, and for the first time in years, slept straight through the night. A few weeks passed. The project at the lab was accelerating fast. We were invited to pitch at a health tech summit in Berlin, and I was selected as one of 5 researchers to represent our country. I still wasn't used to this. The way strangers treated me like someone important, how people leaned in when I spoke, wrote down what I said, and sometimes just stared like they were trying to memorize my face. I'd spent most of my life invisible, and now suddenly I wasn't. It was exhilarating and a little terrifying. Then came the feature. One of the summit's media partners reached out to do a spotlight piece on young innovators changing the world. They interviewed me for an hour, asked about my childhood, my motivation, what kept me going. I hesitated when the journalist asked about my support system, my family. I paused, then smiled and said, let's just say I had a lot of space to grow. The piece ran the following week. Full-page photo. My name in bold letters. Quotes about breaking generational patterns and carving out your own legacy. The article went viral in the industry. I got calls from 3 major universities asking if I'd consider teaching part-time. Our lab's inbox filled with investment inquiries. And my parents? They finally called. Not just Emma this time. Not just a half-hearted text. A full-on call from my mother's number. I watched the screen light up and vibrate across my desk as I reviewed a grant proposal. For a split second, I considered answering. Not to reconnect, but to say everything I'd been holding in since the day they didn't show up. But I didn't. Instead, I hit decline. 5 minutes later, I got a text from my dad. We saw the article. We're proud of you, son. Let's talk soon. Things don't have to be this way. That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of how easily the roles had flipped. When I was a kid, every time I asked for their attention, their support, their time, I got excuses. Now that they wanted access, suddenly I was the one with the power to say yes or no. And I kept saying no. But life, again, had one more twist waiting for me. A month later, I got a call from a name I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Gloria, my mom's sister. She was always the neutral one, the peacemaker, the person who brought potato salad to every event and tried to keep the peace with passive-aggressive hugs. Daniel, she said after a long pause. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I thought you should know. Your dad's planning something. A surprise birthday party. For you. I blinked. What? Your 30th's coming up. They're trying to throw a party. Huge guest list. Friends, extended family. They want to make it this big thing. Your mom's calling it a reconciliation moment. Thought you'd want to know before invitations go out. I was stunned. Not because they were throwing a party, but because they thought I'd come. They haven't even spoken to me properly, I said quietly. And now they want to parade me around like I'm suddenly a trophy? Gloria sighed. I know. I told them it was a bad idea. But they think if they make it public enough, you'll show. I felt a slow heat crawl up my spine. Not anger, clarity. They want to use me to clean their image, I said. To rewrite the story. Pretend they've always been supportive. There was silence on the line. Then Gloria said, Are you going to go? I didn't respond to Gloria's question that day, but I spent the next few hours pacing around my apartment, chewing on the possibilities like a problem I needed to solve. Every part of me wanted to ignore the whole thing, leave them on read, like they had done to me my entire life. But another part of me, a sharper part, saw the opportunity for what it was. They wanted a performance. They wanted optics. They wanted a shiny redemption arc where they got to pretend they'd always believed in me. So I made a decision. I was going to let them host their party. And I was going to burn the whole illusion to the ground, politely, of course. 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived in my inbox. A digital card covered in gold cursive and balloons. Daniel turns 30. Come celebrate a family success story. The event was scheduled for a Saturday evening, hosted at a local country club I didn't even know they had access to. Dress code. Formal. Guest list. Family. Family friends. Old classmates. Neighbors. Anyone who could be impressed. I RSVP'd yes without a comment. They didn't message back. They probably thought they'd won. In the meantime, I made a few quiet preparations. First, I booked a flight, not to my parents' city, but to a nearby one with a luxury hotel where I could stay in peace. Second, I reached out to my team's media liaison and asked if she'd mind scheduling a press release to go out at exactly 8 p.m. the night of the party. Just something simple, a short blurb announcing that our research team had secured FDA pre-approval for the first round of clinical trials, alongside a new $14 million grant from a major health foundation. She smiled and said, "Happy early birthday." The night of the party, I arrived exactly on time, wearing a tailored black suit and walking calmly past a dozen cars lined up in the circular driveway. It was the kind of event they used to drag me to as a kid, just so I could hand out plates or run and get more drinks while Jake soaked up all the attention. Funny how times change. I walked through the entrance, and the whole room seemed to pause. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. I spotted my mother first, dressed in navy blue, holding a wine glass, her smile too tight to be sincere. My dad stood next to her in a rented tuxedo, already sweating under the collar. Emma hovered near the buffet, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. I scanned the room. All the people who'd spent years calling me the quiet one, the serious one, the one who's always in school, were now smiling and waving like I'd always been the golden child. Jake wasn't there. I walked up to my parents. My mother opened her mouth first. "You look good." I nodded. "I do." Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to do something special. Thought it was time we really showed you how proud we are." "Thanks," I said flatly, and let the silence hang. The party went exactly how I expected. Speeches, toasts, the DJ playing some middle-of-the-road classics no one really liked. I kept to myself, sipping sparkling water and watching them all orbit around their own fantasy. This idea that we were a close family again, that none of the hurt mattered now that I was successful enough to be acknowledged. Around 7:45, my mother clinked her glass. "Everyone," she said loudly, "if we could have your attention, we want to say a few words about our son, Daniel." The spotlight hit my face. I didn't flinch. Dad stepped forward, clearing his throat like he was about to address Congress. "Daniel has always been brilliant," he began. "Even if we didn't always understand what he was working on, we knew he was destined for great things. And now, we're just so honored to celebrate his achievements with all of you, his friends, his family, his support system." Support system. I smiled. That was the moment. I stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it gently, and said, "Thank you for the kind words, Dad. And thanks, everyone, for coming." I scanned the room. Before I say anything else, I'd like to clear up a small misconception. Some of you may think I got here because I had a great support system, that I was lifted up by a family that always had my back. I looked at my parents. That's not quite true. There were small murmurs. My mother blinked. My father shifted uncomfortably. I continued. "When I graduated with my master's degree last year, I reserved a table for 10 at a restaurant. 10 seats. Every single one of them empty. Instead, my family chose to attend a backyard barbecue. My brother texted me no one wanted to sit through another boring speech." Gasps. A few people turned to my mom, who went pale. That was one of the most important days of my life. Not because of the ceremony, but because it was the day I stopped waiting for their approval. Silence. Absolute silence. "And tonight," I said, smiling, "I'd like to thank you for coming. Because just a few minutes ago, a press release went out to the industry. My team's research is moving into clinical trials. We secured $14 million in new funding, and we're developing a treatment that could give paralyzed patients back the ability to walk." The room erupted in applause, but I kept my eyes on my mother's stunned face. My dad had stopped clapping halfway through. "And while I appreciate the gesture of this party," I added, "I want to be very clear. I didn't get here because of my family. I got here in spite of them." I stepped back, set the mic down, and walked out. People tried to stop me. Emma followed me into the hallway, calling my name. "Daniel, wait." I turned. "You laughed when Jake said I was a background character." She flinched. "I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," I said. "And I meant what I said tonight." She didn't follow me after that. I got in my car, drove back to the hotel, turned off my phone, ordered room service, and watched the city lights flicker through the window as I ate. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of texts. Some supportive, some apologetic, some angry. My dad sent one long message about how I'd humiliated them in front of everyone and that I should have handled it like an adult. I didn't respond because I had finally handled it exactly like an adult. By telling the truth, by setting boundaries, and by refusing to let people who abandoned me suddenly claim credit for what I built. That was 6 months ago. I haven't seen or spoken to my family since. But the project is thriving. My name's been added to the shortlist for a National Innovation Award. We're on track to publish in one of the top medical journals next quarter. And in a few days, I'll be moving into a new apartment overlooking the water, something I used to think only people with real families did. Now, I know better. Sometimes, you don't find your family. You build one. And you start by walking away from the people who never clapped when you were small, so they don't get a front row seat when you finally grow tall. When the bride pointed me toward the trash bins, I finally understood my place in their perfect little love story. I'm Evan, 32, and if you'd asked me last year how I felt about my younger brother getting married, I'd have said I was happy for him. Genuinely. Jeremy and I weren't close, never had been, but we coexisted peacefully. We were those siblings who shared a roof growing up, but not much else. He was loud, brash, constantly surrounded by friends or drama. I was quiet, a bit reserved, always more comfortable listening than talking. Still, I always showed up for him when it mattered. Birthdays, college move-in, even those messy breakups where he'd call me slurring his words at 3 a.m. I'd answer. I'd come. I always came. So when the wedding invitation arrived, I RSVP'd yes without a second thought. It felt like a given. I was his only brother, after all. I should have noticed the signs. The invite said, Evan plus guest. But there was no call, no message, no, hey man, can't wait to see you there. When I texted him to ask what the dress code was, just a casual question, he replied 2 days later with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No see you soon, no details. I chalked it up to stress. Weddings are chaos. Maybe he was overwhelmed. That's what I told myself, because the alternative, that he didn't care if I came or not, wasn't something I was ready to consider. The day of the wedding was bright and hot, the kind of late summer afternoon where everything feels loud. I drove 2 hours to the venue, a fancy vineyard I'd never heard of but immediately realized was the kind of place that cost a small fortune just to breathe on. Rows of white chairs faced a flower-drenched altar, and everything smelled like fresh roses and money. I'd brought a gift, an envelope with a generous check, more than I probably should have given, but again, it felt like a given. Jeremy was family. You show up, you support, you give. I walked up to the welcome table and smiled at the girl behind the clipboard. She scanned the list, frowned slightly, then scribbled something on a post-it before glancing up. Just you, right? I nodded, a little thrown off by her tone. Yeah, Evan. She pointed vaguely toward the far side of the seating area. We're pretty full, but there's some standing room by the hedge. She said it like she was offering me a privilege. I blinked. There's no seat for me? She shrugged. Sorry. Bride's side did some last-minute adjustments. Last-minute adjustments. Like I was luggage that didn't make it onto the plane. I stood there for a second, dumbfounded. I scanned the rows. I saw cousins. Old high school friends. A guy Jeremy used to play Call of Duty with in college. Even the hairstylist was there, fanning herself and chatting with someone who looked like the officiant. But no seat for me. I swallowed it. I told myself not to make a scene. It was his day, not mine. I started walking toward the hedge when I heard her voice, sharp, nasal, a little too theatrical. Oh, you can stand by the trash, she said, pointing behind her without looking at me. We're out of seats. It was Paige, the bride. We'd met 3 times. Once over lunch, once at a family barbecue, and once when I helped Jeremy move apartments and she barely acknowledged me. Each interaction left me with the same impression. Paige was pretty, polished, and profoundly uninterested in anyone who couldn't serve a function in her social climbing. At first, I thought she was joking, but when I laughed, her face didn't change. I mean, seriously, she added, waving a hand like she was dismissing a waiter. There's a spot near the bins. You'll be fine. I looked around. People were watching. Some awkwardly looked away. No one spoke up, not even Jeremy. I saw him a few feet away, adjusting his tie and talking to one of Paige's uncles. He glanced at me, gave a tight smile, and then went right back to his conversation. Like this was normal. Like it was okay. Like I wasn't the guy who helped him pay off a credit card bill last year when Paige's ring accidentally went on his emergency fund. And that's when something clicked. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. I looked at the gift in my hand, an envelope with a 4-digit check and a handwritten note wishing them happiness, and I realized exactly what I was to them. A wallet. A placeholder. Background noise. I turned to Paige and smiled. Fitting, I said, nodding toward the bins. since that's where this marriage belongs. I don't remember if she said anything back. Maybe she gasped. Maybe she didn't. I just turned around, walked toward the parking lot, and felt the weight of something lift off my shoulders. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, fast, uneven. Evan, wait. Jeremy. I kept walking. And just as I reached the car door, he caught up. Seriously? You're gonna make a scene, he said, out of breath and red in the face. This is my wedding, dude. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized I didn't recognize him anymore. I didn't say a word. He stood there, breathing hard, like I had just punched him in the gut. Like he was the one who'd just been shoved aside like last week's recycling. Look, he said, glancing nervously back toward the venue. You're being dramatic. Paige didn't mean anything by it. I raised an eyebrow. She told me to stand by the trash, Jeremy. He rubbed the back of his neck. Okay, yeah, that was not great. But it's her big day. She's stressed. You know how she gets when things don't go exactly right. That right there? That little line? It hit me harder than I expected. You know how she gets. Like he'd rehearsed this excuse before. Like there had been other moments, maybe smaller ones, maybe worse, and he brushed them off with the same sentence. He wasn't defending me. He was managing me. Like I was another potential PR disaster on his carefully curated wedding day. I opened the car door, slipped the envelope back into my pocket, and took one long breath. You didn't even notice I didn't have a seat. Jeremy's mouth opened. Closed. I thought you'd find one. I laughed once. Cold. Even the DJ's assistant got a seat, man. Your fiancé's lash technician got one. But not your brother. He looked away. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. She said she wanted a small ceremony, he muttered. But not too small for 20 of her friends I've never met? I said. Let's be honest, this wasn't an accident. This was calculated. He didn't deny it. And honestly, that hurt more than if he had. I shook my head and climbed into the car. I didn't slam the door. I didn't peel out. I just sat for a moment, letting the AC hum around me while I watched him standing there, still trying to decide if it was worth defending his bride or salvaging the last thread of decency left between us. Then he knocked. I rolled down the window halfway. Look, he said, lowering his voice. I'm sorry, all right? Paige, she's particular. And maybe she felt like you didn't support our relationship or... I never said a word against her. I cut in. That's the problem, he snapped. You're always so quiet. So distant. You act like you're better than everyone. And there it was. Not just Paige. Not just a missing chair. This had been simmering for years, bubbling beneath every polite interaction and forced smile. I narrowed my eyes. You think this is about me being quiet? Or is it about you needing people who clap loud enough to hear over your own doubts? Jeremy took a step back like I'd slapped him. Well, yeah, I said, gripping the wheel. Well, I pulled out slowly, leaving him standing in the gravel like a man who wasn't sure whether he'd lost something or dodged a bullet. And I didn't look back. Not when I passed the rows of parked cars. Not when I saw Paige standing near the vineyard's entrance, lips tight, eyes narrowed, one hand on her hip like she'd already spun the narrative in her favor. But I did hear the faint ping of my phone as I drove away. Paige texted, disrespectful and immature. I hope you're proud of yourself. Mom texted, Jeremy's crying. You couldn't have just kept the peace for one day? And Cheryl texted, we all have to make sacrifices for love, Evan. Grow up. I muted the thread. I wasn't interested in playing damage control. Not this time. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, gift envelope in hand, wondering how many times I'd let myself be sidelined in the name of family unity. And what exactly that word, family, was supposed to mean when it only ran in one direction. I didn't want revenge. At least, not at first. But then I remembered something Jeremy probably forgot in all his wedding chaos. The condo. A one-bedroom they'd been renovating on weekends. The starter home Paige kept bragging about online. Jeremy didn't qualify for the mortgage on his own. His credit was a mess. But mine? Mine was clean. Solid. Dependable. So I'd co-signed 6 months ago. They needed me to close the deal. I never took my name off the deed. And that's when the idea began to take shape. Slow, deliberate, and cold. Because if I was just trash to them, then maybe it was time they learned what it felt like to lose something they thought they didn't need. I took one last sip of wine, opened my laptop, and pulled up the documents. And I smiled. That condo? It had a lot of value. The thing about being the quiet one in the family is that people forget you're watching. They mistake silence for passivity, like you're just floating through life without thoughts of your own. But quiet doesn't mean weak. It means I pick my battles. And this one? This was long overdue. The next morning, I took the day off work. Not because I was upset. Not anymore. That emotion had passed. What I felt now was purpose. Calm, clear, and steady. I brewed my coffee, clicked open the folder on my desktop marked property docs, and scrolled until I found what I needed: the co-ownership agreement for the condo Jeremy and Paige were remodeling. Back when Jeremy called me in a panic about losing their dream unit, when they needed just one more adult with clean credit to qualify for the mortgage, I was that guy. No hesitation. I'd been assured it was just on paper, that they'd take care of the payments, and once they refinanced in 6 months, my name would be removed. Well, it had been 7 months now, and I was still on the deed. I checked. Twice. To them, it was a formality. A signature from the dependable older brother. Something they could toss aside once the real adults took over. To me, it was leverage. At 11:03 a.m., I called the real estate attorney I'd worked with when I bought my own place. Nice guy. Discreet. Thorough. I explained the situation, asked what my options were, and waited. You're listed as a co-owner, Evan, he confirmed. That gives you considerable rights over the property. If you wanted to force a sale or reclaim occupancy, you could. Even if I haven't been living there? I asked. Doesn't matter, he replied. Ownership is ownership. That was all I needed. I thanked him, hung up, and started drafting a letter. Not a legal notice, yet, but something polite. Formal. The kind of letter that makes your stomach drop by paragraph 3. I titled it, Notice of Intent to Assume Full Occupancy. Then I paused, because I wanted this to land with precision. Not fury, not drama, just inevitability. I wanted Paige to read it with her morning latte and feel the same sharp flicker of humiliation I felt standing by those trash bins in a press suit with no seat and no voice. Around 3 p.m., I printed the letter, slid it into a clean envelope, and drove it to the condo. I didn't knock. They weren't home. Probably still recovering from the post-wedding festivities, tasting cakes, reviewing drone footage, pretending their seating chart hadn't turned a brother into a punchline. I slid the envelope through the mail slot. On the way back to my car, I took one last look at the condo. It really was a nice place. Mid-century exterior, plenty of light. I'd helped paint those walls, carried in that hideous couch Paige insisted on. She said it was boho chic. Jeremy didn't even know what that meant. I got in my car and drove away, feeling lighter than I had in months. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. Jeremy texted, "What is this letter? Are you serious?" I didn't respond. A minute later, Jeremy texted, "You can't do this, man. Paige is freaking out. We just got married. This is the worst possible timing." I finally replied, "You should have thought of that before telling me to stand by the trash." Read. No reply. I imagined them in the living room, Paige waving the letter like it was radioactive, Jeremy pacing, mumbling, checking the internet for how to remove a co-owner from a deed. Probably Googling my name, wondering if I really meant it, if I'd go through with it. I smiled, because I did, and I would. The next day, the real fun began. First came the email from Paige, long, rambling, laced with faux empathy and passive aggression. "Dear Evan, we're sorry for how things played out at the wedding. Emotions were high. I'd hoped we could start fresh as a family, but your recent actions have made that difficult. I'm not sure why you feel the need to escalate things, but Jeremy and I would appreciate a conversation to clarify everyone's intentions before lawyers get involved. Let's be adults about this." Paige. I didn't respond. The following week, I filed the initial paperwork to force a sale of the condo. My lawyer sent them the notification with my signature neatly printed at the bottom. Jeremy called that night. His voice was strained. No pretense. "You're really doing this?" he asked. "Yes." He was quiet for a beat. "Do you need the money or something?" That made me laugh. "No. I need the respect I've never gotten from you or your wife. I figure this is the closest I'll get. You're punishing me for one stupid seating mistake?" "No," I said. "I'm reminding you that I'm not disposable." He tried to argue, tried to guilt, even pulled the "but we're family" card. That one always came out when consequences hit. "You made a choice, Jeremy," I said quietly. "Now I'm making mine." And with that, I hung up. I wasn't expecting what came next. 3 days later, my mom showed up. At my door. Tired eyes. Tight lips. Holding a plastic container of lasagna like it could erase a decade of favoritism and neglect. "We need to talk," she said. No hello. No apology. Just, "We need to talk." I let her in. She sat stiffly on the edge of my couch, lasagna untouched in her lap. I heard you're trying to take the condo, she said, as if I'd stolen candy from a child. I own the condo, Mom. Half of it. She didn't blink. You know how much this means to Jeremy and Paige. Why are you doing this? That word again. Doing. Like I'd flipped the world upside down, not just stopped enabling it. Because you all taught me something, I said slowly. That being quiet gets you nothing but a view from the trash pile. So I'm trying something new. Mom pursed her lips. She was under stress. Weddings are complicated. So is being treated like an afterthought by your own blood. She didn't argue with that. She just stood, placed the lasagna on the counter, and said, I hope this is worth it. I walked her to the door. It already is, I said, and closed it gently behind her. I returned to the table, picked up my coffee, and watched the inbox light up again. Lawyers, mortgage officers, and, somewhere in between, Jeremy trying to find a compromise. But there wouldn't be one, because I wasn't done, and what I had planned next. That was the part they'd never see coming. The final email from their lawyer came in 2 weeks later, polished, direct, and with a faint air of desperation beneath the legalese. Our clients, Mr. Jeremy Carter and Mrs. Paige Carter, request that Mr. Evan Carter reconsider the forced sale and allow a voluntary buyout of his share. They are prepared to offer a lump sum of $15,000 as compensation in exchange for relinquishing any ownership or legal claim to the property in question. 15,000. I laughed. Out loud. Not because of the number, though. Yes, it was insultingly low, but because it was the perfect final act of arrogance wrapped in fake generosity. That condo was easily worth $500,000. The down payment alone had been 70. And now they wanted me to walk away for the price of a used car? Nope. I typed out a quick reply, CC'd my lawyer, and kept it simple. Offer declined. See you in mediation. Because I wasn't bluffing. I hadn't been bluffing from the moment I slid that envelope through their door. And for once in my life, I didn't care if it made me look bitter or petty. The truth was, I was bitter, but not over one wedding slight. It was years of being treated like a safety net, only unrolled when they needed something, then shoved back into the closet when they didn't. This was bigger than trash bins and seating charts. This was about every time I sat in silence so someone else could speak over me. The mediation happened a month later. A sleek office downtown, neutral walls, bad coffee. They both showed up looking tired. Paige didn't meet my eyes. Jeremy gave me a tight nod, the kind you give a stranger who might have once been important. The mediator, a kind-eyed woman in her 50s, started things off cordially. We're here to determine the most amicable path forward. Evan, since you initiated the action, would you like to start? I did. I passed her a copy of my proposal already prepared, already signed. I wasn't just selling my half of the condo. I was buying theirs. Silence. Paige's head snapped up. Excuse me. Jeremy leaned forward. You're offering to buy us out? I nodded. Full market value. I've had it appraised. I'll handle closing costs and all legal fees. You walk away with a clean check and no lien on your future. The mediator blinked in surprise. That's extremely generous. It was. And it wasn't about being generous. It was about being done. Jeremy leaned back, visibly thrown. Paige's eyes narrowed. This is some power play. You just want to evict us. No, I said calmly. I want to own what I already helped build. You can stay until the end of the month. 30 days. That's more grace than I got. They didn't respond. Just whispered to each other, lips tight, hands clenched. The mediator gave them time. After 10 minutes of hushed arguing and one dramatic sigh from Paige, Jeremy finally said, We accept. And just like that, it was done. For weeks later, I had the keys. They were gone. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. The place was cleaner than I expected. A few leftover decorations still hung in the hallway, framed photos of their engagement shoot, all smiles and sunlight. I boxed them up, carefully, and left them at their new address, return label and all. I stood in the empty living room for a while, just breathing. The walls still held the faint scent of fresh paint. The same paint I'd helped roll on during that first renovation weekend, when Jeremy was excited and Paige pretended not to hate getting her hands dirty. I could still hear her complaints echoing in my head. This color looks cheap. Can we afford something more modern? I smiled. And then I opened the windows. Let the air sweep through. 2 weeks after the final papers cleared, I listed the condo for sale. I didn't want it. I never wanted it. What I wanted was control, respect, closure. And I got all three. The condo sold above asking. I made back my share and then some. More than the money, though, was the peace. I didn't hear from Jeremy again. Not directly, but I saw the posts. Passive-aggressive Instagram stories about fake family, and some people never grow up. Paige went on a podcast ranting about how jealous siblings ruin marriages. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I just watched, sipped my coffee, and smiled. My mom texted once. Just one line. I hope you're proud of what you did. I didn't reply. But if I had, I would have said, I am. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't just show up. I didn't just take it. I chose me. A few months later, I moved into a new place, my own, paid for in full with the profit from the sale. No shared deeds. No cosigns. No Paige. No Jeremy. Just sunlight, quiet, and space that was entirely mine. I put up one framed photo in the living room. Not of family. Not of weddings. Just a landscape shot I took on a solo trip the week after everything ended, a mountain road in the distance, empty and open, winding towards something better. Every time I pass it, I remember that moment by the trash bins. And I smile. Because that was the day I stopped standing in the background and started building something for myself.